Hey everybody, happy Friday. We've completed week 2 of remote learning. And so far it's been pretty successful. Again, I have noticed that views are still down this week, so we need to do a lot better job of making sure that we're getting everything done on time and watching the videos every day, doing your ELA and your math, because a lot of you have been giving in math work, but not so much the ELA. They're both just as important. I know that you guys might like math a little bit more, but it doesn't mean you have to take your focus off of ELA. I think you guys are actually going to really like today's lesson. We're going to be looking at the artwork again, the Boston Massacre artwork by Paul Revere. And we're also going to be comparing that artwork to another artwork that we've seen, which is on page 22 in George versus George. And aside from comparing the artworks, we're also going to be comparing text and art. So that's something we haven't done before. So we're going to be taking what you've learned so far from reading and applying it to what you've seen so far with the artworks as well. Okay? So our focus question still remains, what are the perspectives of both sides in George versus George? And of course we are seeing that there is a British perspective, there is a colonist perspective, and that's going to be true throughout the entire unit. And you're going to see a little bit more of one perspective today as you take a little bit of a deeper dive into the artwork by Paul Revere, okay? And the question is, what does a deeper exploration of perspective reveal in the texts The Boston Massacre, okay? Now, like I said, we're going to be comparing text and we're going to be comparing artwork. So I have text versus artwork. And it says, what do they reveal about perspective? So what does each text reveal? What does each artwork reveal? Okay? Now, the two texts that you're going to be looking at are George versus George and The Massacre on King Street. I will be re-uploading, I should say, page 22 of George versus George and The Massacre on King Street, as well as the Boston Massacre artwork. I'm going to be putting up a different version of it today, because I know some people had messaged me and said, hey, like, I can't look at the bottom, I can't read it, that's fine. And I said, that's fine, because you're going to be looking at it closer today. I'm going to be putting up a different version that you guys can zoom in on, okay? It's going to be more of like a PDF or a photo that you can zoom in, you can take a look at the bottom, you can look at the actual people's faces, look at those poses that we talked about yesterday, and you're going to go from there. Also today, you're going to have a video that goes along with the Boston Massacre artwork. That video is going to be about Paul Revere and who he was as a person and what he meant to the Revolutionary War. And if you remember in that video I made about like things you need to know before we kind of get into the American Revolution, I mentioned that Paul Revere was one who went around and said the British are coming, and kind of assembled everyone. So that right there should give you some perspective of A, which side he's on, and B, like how he feels about certain things that are happening. And once you watch that video, you'll fully understand. And you guys should know that he was a rebel colonist. And so think about the word rebel. Someone who's a rebel doesn't usually follow the rules. So if he's a rebel colonist, that really gives you that perspective, okay? And speaking of that, a rebel colonist and perspective, that picture, the Boston Massacre picture, became a wildly popular piece of artwork, okay? And the reason it did was because of where everybody was at the time, and that was of the Boston Massacre, that artwork. This was happening in Boston, this was in Massachusetts, and colonists started to see it. And so the more that people saw it, the more popular it became. Now, it's going to be up to you guys to determine why you might think that's the issue, okay? Or that's the thing that happened. Like, why would seeing that picture become so popular amongst colonists, okay? The other big questions we have today are, how is the artwork similar to the texts? You guys are going to be able to answer that on your own. I'll have that for you. And then the other one is, how is the artwork different from the texts? And it's basically just comparing it, but in two different questions. I'm not going to make you guys do a chart. I'm not going to make you guys do a Venn diagram or anything like that, because I think that it's good for you guys to just kind of write it out and say, hey, this is how it's similar, this is how it's different, boom, done. It could even be just two pieces, two differences, two similarities, make these racist responses if you want, okay? Now, the real first start of this lesson is to, again, look at the Boston Massacre. So I've pulled up the Boston Massacre on my computer, and like I said the other day, it's hard to see off my computer, but we're gonna do it anyway. So I'm gonna hold this up right here real quick, and again, you guys are gonna have your own version of this, and there you go. And you'll be able to zoom in, but if you look really closely, you kind of see certain things about the poses, you see certain things about the British and about the colonists, right? And this is actually a much different view of the Boston Massacre, even than what's in George versus George on page 22. So we saw the Boston Massacre, and now I will open to 22 in George versus George. And I'll hold this up for you guys as well, okay? And again, I'm gonna upload these so you can zoom in, but if you look, this picture is much, much different than the picture we just showed of the Boston Massacre, okay? That was made by Paul Revere. So these two versions of the same event have very different perspectives, okay? And the Boston Massacre that I just showed you, the Paul Revere one, leans to one side. And it should be pretty clear which side that is, okay? But now, I'm gonna do some similarities and differences that I've seen in these two pictures with you before I have you guys finish up the rest of them, all right? So, one thing I noticed that is similar is that there are both, in both pieces of artwork, there are colonists and British, okay? I have noticed that the British are in red uniforms with guns, okay? That's something I noticed in both pieces of artwork. Something that's different is that if I look at George versus George, it's snowy. Okay, so George versus George has snow. And then, because if you look at this picture, you can't really tell whether it was snowing or just a regular day or whatever it might be, okay? But the one thing I do notice is that there's a lot of that smoke. And we talked about that smoke yesterday, or at least I did. It was one of my wonderings, what is all of that smoke? And I don't know if you guys have figured that out by now, but that smoke was most likely guns being fired, okay? So I'm gonna say Boston Massacre has lots of gun smoke, okay? And the thing that can't be forgotten is that you guys need to reread the Massacre on King Street, okay? Massacre on King Street is a very interesting text because it, as much as the Boston Massacre artwork by Paul Revere gives one perspective, the Massacre on King Street gives two perspectives. It kind of touches on both the colonist perspective and the British perspective, which is also similar to George versus George. George versus George kind of gives you a little bit of both, but with a little bit of a leaning one way more than the other, okay? So today's lesson is fairly simple. You're going to be comparing the artwork to the texts and contrasting the artwork to the texts. Then you're going to be finding similarities and differences between page 22 and the artwork by Paul Revere. And then you're going to answer some questions. The questions will be in the document for you. I will also post one in the homework folder on the tab on Google Classroom for you. And that's it. Please make sure you watch the video. The Paul Revere video is super interesting, and it's not very long, but it does, like I said before, give you that interesting perspective. Okay, I am gonna hit you guys with some weekend homework as well. So please just make sure you guys are getting everything in on time. Stuff that was due earlier in the week is due by Sunday. It's all due by Sunday. But please have it in as early as possible so that I can grade it, get it back to you, because it is a lot to grade with multiple assignments for multiple children every single day. But until then, stay safe. Hope everybody's families are doing well, and I will check in with you guys over the weekend and on Monday as well. All right, enjoy, guys. Bye.